Fantastic. All right, guys. It looks like, well, we got a minute, but let's get started today. Since everybody is here, I'll continue to let people in as they roll in. And if you would stay on mute until you're called upon to ask your question, that would be much appreciated. I'm going to do hold on. No, I'm not going to do that. I see a couple people not muted. Ask. All right, let's see. DJ, would you mute yourself, please? We got everybody. Oh.
Helping out here.
Yeah, I'm just going down the list to make sure I see it's 12 o'clock. Okay. If you haven't muted yourselves yet, would you please do that? Sometimes you forget and you start taking a call and then we can all hear the details of your call. So if you haven't done that, would you please do so now? I'd appreciate it. Let's see. All right. I think I got everybody else. Great. Welcome to Tuesday Notary Titans. Bill is not with us today. He's tied up. And so I had the opportunity to ask back my favorite co-host, Beth Hathud, who's joined us today to answer your questions. Now, we were not on last week because several of us were at the NNA conference in Phoenix, well, actually Scottsdale, Arizona. And so it was a great opportunity to meet some of you in person. I know it was the first time I got to meet Beth in person. And so that was really nice because even though I see Beth frequently on the screen, it's always different when you see somebody in person. And the best way to increase, or as Bill would say, deepify your relationships is to take it offline and to meet somebody in person. And that conference was a great way to get that done if you had the opportunity to attend. And if you didn't, then look for regional or in your own area opportunities, even if it's just 3 or 4 of you to grab a cup of coffee. That's how I got started. My first meetup group was 3 people. All right. And I have over 100 that are listed in my meetup group now. So it just starts small and you keep going from there. So today, when you're ready, you have a question in mind, here's what you do. You raise your virtual hand, and if you go down to reactions and click on that and hit the raised hand like I just did, you will notice that I probably moved to the top. And when we're done talking, you just lower the hand. And that's how I'll know that you'd like to ask us a question. Let me admit some more people here. There we go. So I'm going to be kind of doing both. So if you have a question, and it can be on any topic, then please go ahead and raise your hand. Both Beth and I are available. I'm in California. Beth is in Arizona. So if you have something specific that you want one or the other to answer, then say this is directed to whoever. Please remember to tell us your name. Some of you have initials. Some of you have other things that are not your name. So if you'd say my name is, and I'm in this state, it would be very helpful because many times your questions are state specific. So Larry, thanks for going first. I saw your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and we'd love to hear your questions.
Laura. Hello, Beth.
Hi there.
I have a question, a sort of a general-ish question. Do you know how in California we have to get a manufacturer certificate to have our stamps made? I wonder, I've never known, is that true universally, or are there specific states where that has to be done? And the reason I ask is because as Laura, you may remember, I've been on a quest to have a round digital stamp made, and I contacted this guy on Etsy to have one made, and I didn't hear from him for a long time. So I stopped the order. Then he came back later asking me questions about, oh, I didn't get notice. So give me some information about your stamp and I'll make your stamp. And I'm all, wait, the one thing he didn't ask me was for the manufacturer certificate, which I already had. And in fact, it would have answered all the questions he asked me. So we got into this back and forth about, I'm like, I don't think you're a legitimate creator of stamps because you didn't ask about the certificate. And he implied that it's just California and we California people are being too picky and demanding. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. But even if it's true, you should know to ask what state you're from and for the certificate. And it occurred to me that maybe he's right. Maybe it's just a California thing. I don't know. Do other states need that certificate as well?
So first of all, that is kind of a California thing, although there could be some other states that require some form of proof that you're commissioned before you can get a stamp made. What their specific state process is, I couldn't tell you off the top, but I do believe there are others that have some kind of process in place. Now, in terms of California, regardless of what state the manufacturer is in, they must follow the California rules, which means one, they have to be approved by the Secretary of State. So if they're not approved on that approved list of vendors that you can download and look at the Secretary of State's website, then they could be a valid vendor, but not for us. So it doesn't make them invalid. It just means they're not valid for a California stamp.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. You are welcome. And thanks for asking, Larry. Go ahead and take down your hand. And Nikki, oh, good to see you, Nikki.
Hi, Laura. How are you? Long
I am
time.
good. Thank you
Okay.
for asking.
Thank you. So going back to the stamp question, I was just notified that my stamp was used on the deed. This is kind of rampant in California right now.
Yeah.
And when I was sent a copy of the deed, it's my exact stamp, but I have that stamp right here in my room.
Right.
And so somebody made that stamp,
Mhm.
or I believe a deed needs an original stamp. Is that correct, Laura? Or could it be a Xerox that's nicely?
They could have somehow used the Xerox to make a stamp,
Yeah,
but you on a certificate for it to be valid, it has to be an original stamp.
okay. So there are stamp makers out there who don't know or don't care that California requires a letter
Mhm.
for them to make a stamp.
It's
And
certainly possible for vendors who are not in the state of California to not care or understand what our process is. And if the notary is California, it's your obligation to make sure you're using somebody who's on the list, which means they went through the approval process and they know they have to have a certificate of authorization unless they are fraudulent themselves.
so if you're stealing a property, you could care less that you're making a fraudulent stamp. Right?
Well, what I'm saying is if you're not an approved vendor, you don't know what we need. in
Yes,
California, you may not realize that,
exactly.
what its purpose is. That's why we have to have you have to use the approved one, and that approval number, that vendor's approval number has to be on the stamp.
Yeah, and it's there and an A1. So, it's exactly like my stamp.
Yeah.
So
It happens.
unfortunately,
I'm sorry it happened to you, but you're not the first and you won't be the last.
no,
People have done it just from the photocopies and then, made a stamp.
I went through that exact same thing, Nikki. My stamp was reproduced into a rubber stamp, or should say the information on my stamp was reproduced and used to release liens on 2 pieces of property here in the Phoenix metro area. So my only saving grace on that was my stamp. In Arizona, we have to register our stamps. So when we get them made, we have to send a copy. Or if we need to have a stamp remade midterm, we have to send a copy back to the Secretary of State that shows how it was designed. Does it have a rickrack border? Does it have a solid border? What information is on what line? Well, on the stamp that they reproduced, they actually created a rubber stamp so they could have that original seal. And not just photocopying and pasting on these documents. The information on the lines was not exactly the same.
Oh,
And that's one of the ways that we caught them. The other thing was handwriting analysis, because obviously it takes a notary signature, right, on that certificate. It was really a good forgery, but not quite good enough. And so those two things, after 9 months of dealing with this, was what was my saving grace.
well, in my case, they didn't care what the handwriting looked like because it is totally, totally different. I'm big and flowery. They were very sharp. And so all they did was use the stamp and for the county recorder, and the county recorder didn't check the signatures, which is odd because Riverside's rejected 2 of my deeds because I forgot a period after my middle initial, and my SH was kind of lumped together. So I've had 2 deeds from Riverside rejected because they checked the handwriting. In Orange County. Apparently they don't have time to do that, so. Unfortunately, if they did, this person would still own their property.
You're muted, Miss Laura.
My dog was barking. So that the county only is required to check certain things, and that stuff goes through there. They make mistakes and forget to check things or don't notice things, just like we forget to stamp. We forget to do things. One time I had forgotten to stamp, and it was 2 years later that because they were refinancing, whatever they were doing, that it came up that previous one didn't have a stamp on it. Yeah, I mean, this is like 10 years ago. So, and back then you could go back and fix it. You can't do that today. So remember, the people at the county are like notaries. Same thing. They can have human errors, not notice something and let something slip through that, unfortunately, in this case, was bad news for the owner. But thanks for sharing, Nikki, because everybody, of course, wants to be cautious and careful about keeping their stamps in their possession. However, we can't stop people from doing it from a photocopy and creating their own. That's just out of our control. But I will tell you what can also be a saving grace is, of course, our journals, because that would not be in your journal, and they would be able to see where you were on the day that you were notarizing. And that's one of the reasons the journal is so freaking important, even if your state doesn't require it, because you can demonstrate, I log everything in, and you can see from here to here to here to here, that wasn't me. Did they ask to see your journal, Nikki?
Well, just today, Old Republic Title contacted me for a copy of my journal pages. And I already knew about this in mid-April, when the owner was notified that her property was transferred, and a real estate agent contacted me because the guy was trying to sell the property 3 weeks later, and she got suspicious. So I've had the deed that whole time. And and of course, it was nowhere in my records. And I checked call logs, notary log for the last 6 months. I checked everything. And so they sent me a copy of the deed, and it was definitely not my writing, just my stamp.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing today.
Well, I wouldn't have shared except for Larry brought up stamps and that. So that was a good segue into somebody did copy my stamp. Thank you, Larry.
You never know when somebody else's question can spark off some other conversation that's really important for notaries. So thank you both. All right. So I will repeat my instruction. If you are interested in asking a question, please just raise your virtual hand so that I know you're waiting to have your question answered. Or if you want to share something you think is important for notaries to be aware of. In the meantime, let's see, Jeff Clark, you're not on, are you? I can't see everybody. Jeff Clark, are you on today?
He is not.
He is not. What about Maria Coburn?
No, ma'am.
All right, well, I was going to give them a chance to promote their upcoming Notary Family event on July 15 in Southern California. If you want to know more about that, reach out to Jeff Clark. He's in Antioch, California, or Notary Family directly, or Maria Coburn. She's in San Jose, California, about their upcoming networking event. Both myself and Bill will be at that event in Southern California. So if you want a chance to see us, there's your opportunity. Okay, now
So is a little message in the chat. Somebody was asking, going back to that issue that Nikki had and that I've experienced as well. Is it something that your E&O covers in case you get sued?
well, your E&O will help provide legal services for that. And they'll give you the legal services to support you up to your policy amount.
And so in my case, from the time the Attorney General presented this issue to me, to the time it got resolved, my E&O covered everything involved in that situation. So the answer is yes. If you're in a civil suit, that might be questionable, but the actual notarial determining innocence or guilt process is covered under your E&O.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as what's going on is not a purposeful event by you, then your E&O is going to step in. It doesn't protect you against fines by your Secretary of State. It will protect you in a civil suit. It will provide legal assistance for you. Okay, Nikki, you still had another question?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Beth. So at what point and I think this will help the whole group, at what point would you notify your E&O carrier that you've been notified your stamp was used on a deed?
Immediately, as soon as you know.
Okay.
Here's what I didn't do, and this is something, well, here's what I did, but only did it in a roundabout fashion. You have to understand that government offices are kind of like the military, right? Military, I use that as my moniker, only because if it's not on the right form for the military, you don't get anything done, right?
Right.
Secretary of State is the same way. They have a specific form that you have to file that says that your stamp or seal or journal is lost or stolen. Now, that was the verbiage in our law at the time mine happened. Now it says lost, stolen, or compromised, right? So the fact that you never lost your stamp, but it was compromised is where I fell short also. Not understanding all of those words in the law. They said, it was lost or stolen, you didn't report it on this form. Well, A, it wasn't lost or stolen, physically stolen. And B, I did notify the Secretary of State's office in an affidavit deposition submitted by my attorney. Wasn't good enough. So you need to know if there is some particular way that your Secretary of State's office wants you to report some of these things, regardless of what's happening on the legal side and their submission on the legal side, you still have to file those forms.
And let me just say for the state of California, Nikki, it is not a specific form. It has to be in writing. It needs to be done with immediately or as soon as possible that you're aware of it, and you need to send it via a method that produces a receipt.
Okay, I did all that
Okay,
and filed a report with the district attorney real estate division in Orange County also.
all right, very good. Well, then you've done everything that you can. And that's all we can do. Thank you, Tabitha, for posting in the chat. If you guys didn't see it, Toastmasters is this Thursday, 9:30 to 10:45. It's notarymasters.org is the website if you want to go there. Thursday, June 15th. So that's this Thursday morning. This is a great opportunity for you to participate in how we get better at our communication skills. And through my reading and following different mentors and coaches, the number one skill that makes the difference from one professional to another is your ability to communicate well, clearly, articulately, and that you are well understood. And the most frustrating appointments for consumers are when they have somebody who cannot even frame their questions or describe their process in a clear and distinct manner. So if you get nervous in front of one person or 100, this is a great place for you to develop that skill. And it's one of the ways you can differentiate yourself from other notaries. You don't even ever have to plan to be speaking in front of a group. It will help your day-to-day one-on-one conversations as well. All right. I don't see any hands up. You guys are not very inquisitive today. I do ask that you not ask the questions in the chat. Would you please raise your hand so everybody has an opportunity to hear it and hear the answer to it? Because again, one question can help everybody on the call. Boo, I see your hand. Go ahead and there you go.
That was me. I did put a question in the chat. I'm bad. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that was me too. Sorry.
I've been going over your one of your courses, and it's on living wills and trusts.
Mhm.
And I got a little bit confused on witnesses. So I guess my question is, if you're looking at wills, estates, and things like that, you'll have power of attorneys, you'll have a will, and you'll have some other documents. So with that said, I know that in California, I know that we don't notarize certain documents as part of the estate, but we can witness. And I want to know when we do that, how that gets journaled, because I know there's other cases where witnesses are used where we don't have to ID them and we don't journal them. And I don't know if that's maybe something that has to do with an advance directive. So I guess I need to know what witnesses get journaled and ID'd and in what circumstances, and when would we not journal and ID certain witnesses?
So let me speak to California, and I'm going to let Beth speak for her state, any other state she's aware of. In a trust, you will have one document called a pour over will. That pour over will is a document that is not notarized in most states. There are a few that will notarize and witness. The witnesses do not have to be identified for the notary if their signatures are not being notarized. And in most cases, a pour over will is just going to have two witnesses. The notary can be one because you're not notarizing it, and they'll have a second person. And that is the main document. Everything else is typically notarized with an acknowledgement or a jurat. So that's how the document, and that's pretty much true for most states. When in a will, Boo, there's two kinds of, in a pour over will, I'm not going to see what I'm about to describe to you. It's just going to be two witnesses and everything else is notarized. However, you may be asked for a last will, which is different. A last will is not part of a trust. It is a standalone document, and it too will have two witnesses. However, there may be an affidavit, a self-proving affidavit that follows the signer of the will or the will maker's signature, or it might be called a testamentary clause or an attestation clause, where there's another paragraph that describes that all three people were there and they saw each other sign at the same time and that the signer's at least 18, blah, 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 blah. And then all three of them will sign that paragraph. Those signatures would then be followed by a notarization, and typically that's a jurat, or it could just be an oath or a jurat. All right, so you have to let the document tell you what's required. If the document stops with the two witnesses signing and there's nothing else, then there's no notarization happening. If you're one of the witnesses, or even if you're not, in your journal, an additional information is where I would say witnesses to the will were, Jane Doe and John Doe. If the witnesses' signatures had to be notarized, then of course you treat them like a signer, and they would have to go in your journal, the identification, the whole 9 yards. So does that make sense to you?
It does. Just one quick question. What about a power of attorney when you are like in a facility or a hospital? In the state of California, would you wouldn't need to journal those witnesses, right? Because I'm not sure if a power of attorney has to have notarizations in California anyway.
So again, let the document tell you what to do. Not all powers of attorney will have witness lines, but if they do, those are signature witnesses, not signature witnessing, which is a notarial act. These are just people who are there to watch the signer sign in addition to the notary. Again, in your journal, you wouldn't journal them as signers. They're just witnesses. You would put them in the additional information, and that would be an option, not a requirement for you.
Okay, so if you have those witnesses, you're going to document that. Why are you documenting anything if there's no notarial act?
That's called best practice. It's called because I get called into court and they want to know what I remember. And that's how I can remember, yes, we did have witnesses, versus no, I don't have anything that said there were witnesses. I don't know why you've got witnesses signed on this document. Meaning they went and had people sign it after the fact, after it was notarized.
Okay, so it's just a best practice that if you were to go somewhere and you had this power of attorney and it had to have witnesses, that you yourself would say, okay, I did go out and do this work. I'm going to journal this, even though there was no notarial action here, because it's a best.
No, hold on a second. If you're out there, if they called you as a notary, you're notarizing that power of attorney. What you're not doing is notarizing the signatures of those additional people who signed it. You're only notarizing the signature of your signer.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Now, before we end that, Beth, as you were listening to us go back and forth, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, please?
The only thing I want to say is that there's only one state that I know of in the entire nation that requires a will to be notarized, and that's Louisiana. Of course, it'd be Louisiana, right?
Of course.
Kind of different down there. Nicely, agreeably different. I'm not throwing shade on anybody, but it's Louisiana. Everybody else does not require a will to be notarized. There are some states that say it's an actual voided document if it is notarized. That doesn't mean that if your state doesn't require it to be notarized, that if you haven't notarized, it's going to mess everything up. You just need to be able to parse that out. Now, the only reason I'm telling you this is because people will pull wills off of the internet and bring it and fill it out and bring it to you and say, notarize this for me. It's not legal unless I have it notarized. We can't get involved in those decisions for them. That's UPL. So sometimes it's better to just direct them back to an attorney or to do a little more research before you attach a certificate to that will, because you don't want to be the one that's called in the court and said, you should know. Well, no, we shouldn't. They told us to notarize it. We notarized it, right? But if you approach it with your signer as a collaborative, meaning this should be public information for us somewhere, let's look it up. That's the way you can get out from underneath some of those big faux pas.
And you know what? I'd like to just piggyback on that to say that wills are created in the state you live in. So you all have the ability to go into either it's probate code, most states that's where it is. In some states they call it something else, but you could Google, right? Get your research skills honed,
Yeah.
you know, and find out, you know, where are the laws for last wills and testaments. Go into that code and look for yourself for your state. You don't need to know 50 states. You need to know your state.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't look like your state, that's when I'd say, did you get this for your state, for our own state here? Or did an attorney provide this to you? That's the time you could ask some questions. Now, if they say, this is what I got, my attorney provided it, this is what I'm supposed to use. Okay, you know what? I'm done because I'm not a legal person, but I can ask questions when something doesn't look like what I'm used to seeing for my own state. And you know, Beth and I, for obvious reasons, being coaches, we've had to learn about other states. But for you as a notary, you need to go to mastery level, which means find out for your state, what does this look like? What's your statutory wording? And that will give you the idea, because that document's going to tell you what's required by law in that state. And that's how I learned a lot of this, is that every time something came up, I just went and Googled it. Then I went and found where that code was, where that law was, and started reading it so I could see what it said. It doesn't mean it says that for all the other states, but at least I know for my state that I'm clear about it. And then I use that logic when I look at any kind of document, that it could be a healthcare directive, whatever it is. Okay. Thank you for bringing up that question, Boo, because again, it sparks further conversation, and the way that we get better at what we do is by asking questions. All right. And then I do want to make another announcement. We're halfway through. If you did not know, there's another coaching program on Saturday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. Myself and Matt Miller co-host that. And if you didn't know about it, then just go to my website, coachmelaura.com, scroll down on my homepage and register with your email address. I will send you a link. Well, first I'll send you a confirmation that it's your email, and then I'll send you the link. And once you have the link, hold on to it, because I don't change it. It's always the same, and I don't send out reminders every week. So just another way. It's a much smaller group. If you're feeling a little intimidated by the size of this one, that group is usually around 20 people. So I can take a lot more time on questions, and it's a much smaller group to work with. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement, because Jen was so generous in mentioning that there's a book to help you with that. I just want to remind those who have not had an opportunity to either read the Kindle version or get your own copy, Beyond Loan Signings, right? The ultimate guide to monetizing your notary commission through specialty work. There's entire chapters devoted just to this topic. And part of what we did is we created workbook sections where you can personalize it for your state, so that once you fill it out, now you've got a field guide that you can use and you can rely on, and you don't have to worry about, can I do that in my state? Because we gave you a place to do that. All right, so that's it for my announcement. And you can get that at Amazon.com, by the way. And if you've already got it and you're already reading it, would so much appreciate a review on that. All right, so now I see, is it Cayenne?
Yes.
Cayenne in Arizona. All right. How can we help?
Hello. Beth, I would like to know if you have any more input in regards to submitting our stamp back to the state. I was not aware of that.
Yes, well, it's in your handbook, and a little trick for you, Cayenne, if you keep a digital copy of your handbook on your desktop, and you can use the control, if you're on a PC, it's Control F. That brings up a little find window, and you can type in information that you're looking for. So you don't have to try and rely on even the table of contents or reading all of the pages. You can kind of narrow down your search a little bit, but you should find it in there. I don't think there's a big blurb about it, but it does give you the regulation or the statute code. But typically for us, unlike California can have 15 notarial stamps if they want, right? All different sizes and shapes. Yeah, okay, 5, so I exaggerated. But in Arizona, we can only have 1 stamp at a time. And I had a situation once where I was sitting at a Barnes and Noble Starbucks cafe and had this little railing up around the coffee area, right? And I set my stamp up on the railing. Somebody jiggled the railing, stamp went tumbling off the railing and smashed into 300 pieces. I had to put on a pair of plastic gloves, right, to be able to use my stamp to complete my signing. But what I learned was that if you are mid-commission in Arizona and have to replace your one and only stamp, you need to submit that back to the Secretary of State on their form that you replaced your stamp. This was the situation that happened, and you have to stamp that form with your seal so that they have an image of what your new stamp looks like. So when you go to get it replaced, they cannot duplicate it exactly. They want you to change it. So change the border, change where the information lines up within the border of that stamp, and submit it to them. So that's our process.
Is there a form for the initial to be initially being sent to the state?
Well, that's an interesting fact. I've thought the same thing myself. So if they didn't know what my stamp looked like in the beginning, why do I need to send them an image when I have it replaced? Can't answer that. I have to talk to the Secretary of State about that, but it doesn't require us to send an image when we initially get our stamp.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Cayenne. Thank you, Beth. Will? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Will.
How we doing, guys? This is a old question, Laura. I know I've probably heard it 5, 10 times before, but now it's affected me. So I'm going to ask it again. I've grown weary of my journal, and I'm looking to upgrade. So I'm looking for some input on what would be at least 2 of the best journals that you could think of.
Sure. Will, what's your state?
I'm in Indiana. I apologize. Yeah, I'm in Indiana.
Okay, so I can give you several, but first, it's important that you know what the requirement is in your state. Are you required to have a journal in Indiana?
No, I'm not required, but it is
Okay.
recommended.
Beautiful. So I always ask that first because some states specifically state paper and they're not allowed to have an electronic. If you're not required in the first place, then you can have anything you want. If you like to work with paper, I have 2 to offer you. One is notaryallies.com, and that's allies plural. Notary Allies, that's Kim Flanagan, and she might be on the call today. And she has designed a fabulous journal. And so you might want to look at that one. If you want an electronic journal, an e-journal, then my recommendation is going to be Jurat Inc. So the word Jurat and then inc.com. You can get to it from my website, coachmelaura.com. Up at the top, it says e-journal, and you can go there and check it out. I changed from paper to that e-journal about a little over a year ago. And I've got to tell you, not only did it cut down my time for a loan signing or for a trust where I have many documents, first of all, you can read everything because my handwriting wasn't always that great, that legible. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have beautiful handwriting all the time, especially if I'm a little bit in a hurry. Second of all, the e-journal helped because I'm a more mature notary, let's just say, and I was starting to have arthritis developing in my fingers of my signing hand. And I was having difficulty getting those last documents written down without stopping to shake and rest my hands. So being able to type in from a library of documents and start only doing 2 or 3 letters and it comes up for me has been fantastic. So I love that I can actually search. Like I recently had to find something I did 2 years ago, maybe 2020. And I had to start going through journals, and I went through a lot of them, 5 or 6 a year, paper journals, until I found what I was looking for. All the ones that I have in the last 18 months, I has a search feature, and all I have to do is type in the name and boom, it says, well, is it this one, or this one? And I get to see them all quickly, and I can go right into the one I want, and then I can print it if I need to provide a copy. So those are my recommendations. One, if you're allowed, then go to my website and hit the e-journal at the top, and that's Gerard Inc. And the other one is notaryallies.com.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any downside to it being electronic though, Laura? As far as I don't know about in 10 years, if the company's not around, does that cause an issue for any notary or something like that?
If you decide not to keep your subscription, or for some reason they're not going to be around, I'm not concerned about that with this particular company. But if that were the case, you always have access to print all of them or to download it to a external device that you could secure. You always have that option at any time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
In Arizona, we're not authorized to use an electronic journal, and I cry every day when I think about that. I just wish that we could. It's such a convenience to do it electronically.
It is. And I didn't want to say Arizona, but Arizona is the one I was thinking of that specifically states, paper. So they cannot use one. And actually there's like 3 or 4 states that are like that. That they cannot use an e-journal. So always see, guys, how I look at things. I think, what's the state? What's the rule there? If they're just recommended, then it really doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. If you tell me it's required, then I need to know, okay, does your state require paper, or does it give you opportunity? It doesn't state how the journal has to be created.
I think that keyword is opportunity. Will you have opportunity for electronic or paper? Choose wisely, grasshopper.
Yes. Okay, well, thanks very much. Okay, and then let me just see here if I can. Will, I'm going to lower your hand. And Cayenne, I'm going to lower your hand. Okay, so now, Phil, I don't see you anymore. Did you walk out of the office? I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to go to Diana Hansen instead.
So I'm back on the topic of witnesses. In Texas, I'm allowed to be a witness on some documents.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I do go overboard in my notations, but when I am one of the witnesses, I log in my book that I did witness, but do I need to, or is that overkill, or I don't know.
Diana, it depends. What are your journaling requirements? First of all, are you required to keep a journal in Texas?
Yes.
Okay, and then within those requirements, does it list for you, what elements are required? Are witnesses one of those requirements? Because there are some states that do require it.
Yes. So I'm right in enlisting myself then. Well, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
if your elements, guys, requires you to list any witnesses that were signing, even though they weren't notarized, then you need to be logging that. California is not one of those states. But
Thank
Texas
you.
obviously is. And thank you, Diana, for knowing the answers about your state.
Awesome. I know I surprised Jen this morning, but is it okay if I tell everybody what I got extra of?
Sure.
at conference, I gotten a lot of Mother May I's, and I designed a bookmark, and on one side, I have a very simple script for oaths and affirms with a definition of what they're used for. And then on the back side, I listed common best practices and what's required of my state of the notarial task. So if anyone would like a copy, if you send me your address, I will gladly mail it to you. No charge or nothing. This was my agreement with certain parties, but I'd be glad to help you guys. It makes it very convenient to have those things if you need it.
Thank you, Diana. All right, so if you, Diana, why don't you put your email address in the chat so people can reach out to you? Okay, Phil, are you not back? Well, Phil seems to have left the building. So let's move on to Melissa. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Melissa, if you're still wanting to ask a question. Well, maybe she took a call. My goodness. So I got two people with hands up and neither one responding to me. All
I
right.
did see
That's
Phil
not
walk out
allowing-
the door,
You saw Phil do what?
walk out the door. So he is
Yeah.
not there right now.
Okay, so
Well,
Melissa's having
I'll have to
trouble.
come back, but the reason he's on, you know, right? What is he going to announce? 5 minutes after this call, he's going to have his Legal Shield call, and you can use his phone number to reach out to him if you've never attended that call before, so that you can attend it. It's about a 25-minute call about how that can help you grow your business. Okay, well, we'll see if he comes back in time. I might let him say it himself. Did anybody else have a question to ask? Gosh, I have 110 people on here. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Laura. I don't know if this is the right question to ask because I'm doing this right now, but I have a unique opportunity to reach out directly to a manager at Fidelity that will approve or disapprove my Fidelity certification as a loan signing agent, and I'm writing an email. Is there a way I should introduce myself to this manager? I know when we do pop-ins, we don't go in and say, I'm a notary, I've done 1,000 loan signings and I work with this title company. We don't do that, but as I'm trying to get to an end game here, do you have a suggestion of the best way to approach it? Since I have the contact, I have the source of where to go to get this done.
So I guess my first question is this a cold email or is this part of their process? Because I was given a contact when I was approved, and it was a warm contact, meaning they knew I was going to be providing them with information for me to be approved.
Right. How it happened is I did Fidelity signings. I did about 20 of them for one person who forced me on Fidelity, and they signed the waiver, whatever they had to do, and I did all of her signings. And so I developed a relationship with those escrow agents. They're the ones that brought me into her, have already brought her. She went on vacation, she had a baby, she just got back. So I kind of want to do an introduction. I don't want to drag my feet on this as much longer, and I'm not exactly sure the right way to word it.
Okay, so I'm still not sure if I understand. Are you initiating this reach out of your own accord and nobody knows you're doing that?
I have been told to reach out to her from the escrow agent who has already talked to her about me.
Okay, so I would be starting with that connection.
Okay.
Right, so that it doesn't come across as something that you don't know who I am and you have no reason, you have no idea why I'd be writing to you. I would bring up that connection right away and then, you know, what your end game is.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Beth, oh, I don't know where you went there. Beth, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, definitely do that connection though. That's your unlock for the key in the door. So don't omit that. That's the way you're gonna get their attention. Ah, Tracy referred you. Really cool. Or just another notary looking to
Yeah.
be certified. Big difference, right?
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Welcome. All right, Phil, it looks like you're back. I give you 1 minute. No, and he's running
my
off again. Well, you know what? When you do it twice, I lower your hand. Okay, Linda Bartley Bailey. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Tuesday, everybody.
You can't
Can
hear
you-
them. They're all
can-
muted.
Tuesday.
Just have a quick question about the business insurance. When we're looking for insurance, I know other than the NNA, what would you suggest that we look for in an insurance company for a small business?
So, you know, I get just what is required for me. Because the more insurance I have, the bigger policy I have, the more of a target I can become. So that's why I don't announce to the people that hire me how big my policy is or how many different policies I have. So I just want you to know that that's where I come from, and that may not be where other people, feel they feel they need more protection. I think your best protection is always just know how to do your job well. That's the first thing. And when you don't know what you're doing, reach out for help. Now, in a small business policy, there's a omissions and errors type one that can cover other responsibilities outside of notarizing. The one from the NNA only covers any kind of document in any industry. It doesn't matter. It will cover it if it was notarized, right? So that's what they're covering is E&O for notarization itself. When you have other activities that you are doing, when you're working under the notary umbrella, and you're doing other jobs that aren't notarization, then you might want to have a business policy that covers you for acts, for mistakes, E&O, but for any part of the job that you do. Now, I have Hearts, what's that called? With the big Hartford, thank you. Small business policy. And I just got the smallest one just so I had something. But I'm not a big fan of having big policies. Beth?
Yeah, I have Hartsford as well for business general liability, and that covers everything else that you would be doing in your business that isn't notarial, right? So driving your car, who knows what else could happen?
Loss of documents. It could be some other mistake on a document not notarized, like a rescission document or the Patriot Act. So handling documents that aren't notarized, that's where that would fall then.
Exactly. Right. And any, I mean, it would cover all the way up to walking into someone's home and you've got your bag over your shoulder and you turn and knock over a Ming vase. That's another area that those types of policies will cover. So physical damage as well.
Run over their sprinkler when you pulled up on their driveway.
Yep, exactly.
That kind of stuff. Somebody mentioned cyber attacks. You would want to know if data loss because of a cyber attack is included in that policy, or if you need a separate policy just for that.
Cyber policies are starting to become more to the forefront.
Yeah.
I think we had a discussion about this last night on our program, and it's still kind of up in the air. I mean, initially we need to be able to transmit emails and upload documents and those things from our phones and from our PCs securely. So that's your first line of defense, is to lock the doors. And then if you feel like you need a cyber insurance policy, that would be on top of that. But you've got to lock the doors first, guys. or the alarm doesn't do any good, right? So,
Yeah, Beth, that is such a great point. And just as we concern ourselves with, knowing our state laws before we notarize documents, have we encrypted our emails? Are we using secure lines? There are lots of things we can do to prevent most of it. There's some that can just still get through. But there are things that we can be doing to protect, having everything under password, making sure nobody else, we don't share it with other people, making sure we don't leave it unattended, not using the shared internet, at the cafe, unless you have a VIP or VPN line. I mean, these are all things that we can do to help minimize that opportunity. Before I'd worry about getting a policy, I'd worry about making sure I've done the things I can do to protect my data.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Melissa?
Hello, hello. Okay, I have a question about IDs. I had a signing where it was a lady and a man, and they were not married, I guess, when they bought the house. They were getting a loan modification. So of course, the loan mod's in her maiden name, but she doesn't have any kind of ID with that except the marriage certificate, and she has her new ID with her new married name. So I wasn't comfortable with that. What would you do for that ID situation?
I would share with her what I could accept, such as the previous ID that
Yeah,
had
no.
the maiden name. I'm just going through the list, a passport where she hadn't changed it yet. Something with her face on it that has the other name on it. And if she has something but not there at the time, I'd reschedule for when she could provide something like that. And if she was unable to provide anything that had her face with her name on it, when it happened that recently, then I'm starting to suspect there's something going on there and I'm going to refuse.
That's how I felt. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. But I always share what are things they could have, and maybe they didn't have it with you where you were. Maybe that's something they've got locked up somewhere, or it's at another location. You may have to postpone that appointment until they can provide it. Being inconvenient is not a reason.
Yeah, this was
Yeah.
on the confirmation call that I usually do that. And I ask him, how does your name read exactly on your ID that you're going to be using? And then she gave it to me and that wasn't the same. And then they explained the situation
Sure.
and that they did it before, other notaries do it, of course, and all that. And then the signing service, I asked them, well, maybe they could put, AKA or formerly known as or something, because I'd have to only be able to put in my cert the ID that I get from them.
Right.
They said, no, we've been working with this lender for years and we always do it. So they just, and I barely started working with them. I was getting rolling and then now I think I blew it. But of course, I wouldn't want to work with somebody if I didn't feel comfortable like that.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. Okay. It's all about reasonableness. And most states have that terminology when they're identifying somebody. Is it reasonable for you to rely on a piece of paper that doesn't have a picture, and that doesn't mean that it's her? There's no reasonable way for you to tie the paper and her current ID together. That's how it is. Sometimes they got to figure it out. All right, Tracy.
Real quick, hold on, please. What about, because her new name is on her ID and the old name on the marriage certificate is on the paperwork? We still don't know that that's her, right? Well, her husband.
I'm not sure I understand what you just said.
Okay, so her on the marriage certificate, her new ID name, her married name is, and then it's going to show her maiden name.
It's still a paper certificate without her face on it.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
I'm not recommending it. Laura Biewer is not the law in California, so you have to make your own decisions. Okay, Tracy, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, so to kind of go along with that scenario, what if you're trying to, so I have a signer that needs their middle name to be included, their full name, first, middle, and last name. They have an ID that has a middle initial, and then they have a passport that is expired, but has the full middle name on it.
Mhm.
Would you ID them that way?
I'd use the ID that's acceptable because
Mhm.
that's what we can use. Then, and Tracy, confirm your state.
Arizona.
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you what I think, and then I'm going to make Beth, confirm or tell me different.
Yeah.
That I would use the ID that is current, and I would
Mhm.
note in my journal that I
Yep.
saw the passport to support the middle name.
Right. And I also saw the social security card too. So, but
Social security
that-
card really doesn't matter for me because
right.
I have a picture on it.
Right,
But we
exactly.
did have a passport
Mhm.
that supported it, and it was reasonable for you to believe this was the same.
Right.
person.
Okay. Well, just so you know, when I called the NNA, they said that you cannot use an expired passport, even if it does have the picture. And I thought, well,
Well,
but
you're not
isn't that-
using it. You're not using it for
Right.
identification. You're using it for name variation, and your state
Yeah.
does not say the name must match. Your state
Yeah, that's
says
what I
that
thought too.
reasonableness. Now, remember the NNA, guys, I teach for the NNA, so I know that's what they're going to say. And what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to tell you is they're very parental in trying to minimize your exposure. And by doing that, they give you the least amount of recommendation. They're going to say, no, don't use that. It's
Gotcha.
expired. And I'm going to
Mhm.
tell you that you had an unexpired card. That's what you can use. And all you did is you made a decision that I think it's reasonable to believe that this is
Yeah.
the person, and you back that up with another card. Beth?
I agree.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with Laura. If the document said Tracy Pauline Stahl and your ID only had your middle initial of P, that's a direct correlation for me. It's reasonable to assume that the P on your ID stands for Pauline on the documents. I got no problem with that at
Oh,
all.
so you wouldn't even ask for the passport that has the full middle name?
If you felt
Uh,
needed
Huh.
to verify that, that's fine. But for
Okay.
me,
Right.
it's a
And I
middle
think-
initial that represents the name on the document. I'm okay with that. It's not a bridge too far for me. But if
But-
you want a double verification, absolutely. Look at that
Yeah.
passport, even if it's expired, but just so you can.
Right. Picture. Yeah. Okay.
Anything
Now-
else, picture on it. Could be a work ID.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
That's what I wanted to add. It didn't have to be one of the IDs because you've got the right ID.
Mm.
You're just looking for support. And I may not
Mm-hmm.
ask for the support, but remember, it has to do with the location that I'm in. Am I in their home, or I see pictures of them, or I'm at a Starbucks? Is the document a high risk document, like somebody's transferring property, right? So the higher the risk, the less I'm comfortable. Did I check all the elements of the ID and everything else matched up, right? All of that goes into examining and determining, do I think it's reasonable that this is them? And when everything's good and the only thing is that it had an initial, I might not even ask for the other part of it. But if anything else isn't exact how I think it should be, that's when I start asking for backup. And you have to make that decision, and it's okay to make a different decision the next time if the situation isn't what it was this time.
Mhm. Okay. Great information. Thank you.
Okay. And guys, it's a few minutes after 1 o'clock, so we're going to need to wrap up today. Thank you for joining us. We had about 110 people at the highest amount. I hope that you took something from this call today and that you will join us next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel, and Bill will be back with us. All right, until then, make it a great week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.